we're on right now between Peru and Toronto, Canada, with Scott Maudsley. Scott has been studying the JFK assassination. He's been a researcher for about 30 years.
I got my boy Scott Maudsley here tonight.
Episode 61 features Scott Maudsley, a notorious lone nutter.
So today I'm very excited. I'm here with a very interesting JFK assassination researcher, Scott Maudsley.
Today we have Scott Maudsley from Toronto, Canada. People have been asking us to debate, discuss on so many times over the years. I don't want to.
Warning. This discussion contains spoilers for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System game Earthbound. Obviously, if you have never played this game, stop watching this video right now. I don't want to ruin it for you. You have been warned. I remember a world that no longer exists, and a version of myself that also no longer exists. A world before social media, before Facebook and YouTube, a world before the internet itself even. In that world, there was once a place called Blockbuster Video, where you could rent movies and video games. One day, I remember going with a friend of mine to our local Blockbuster, and we were looking through the video game section for something to play. We came upon this oversized box, and my friend said to me that he heard it was a good game. I flipped the box around to look at the screenshots on the back of it. I noticed the graphics were pretty simple looking, and I commented on it, and this is a direct quote here. "This game doesn't look terribly good." My friend never let me live that down, and he was right, because not only did it end up being a really good game, it ended up being my favorite game of all time. And I'm willing to bet that if you have ever played this game, then it most likely is one of your favorite games too. Because to quote another YouTuber, Clan of the Grey Wolf, to have experienced Earthbound is to have loved Earthbound, and I couldn't agree more. If someone were to ask me why I love Earthbound so much, I wouldn't really know how to answer that question. I could talk about the solid turn-based combat system, or the great soundtrack, or the creative enemies, or the wonderful locales the game takes place in, or the personal memories I have playing this game at different times in my life, all of which I will discuss here. But as Aristotle famously said, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. There is something about this game that sets it apart from other games of its era, or of any era really. But I can't quite say what that is exactly. The world of Earthbound is one that any Westerner from North America can easily recognize, despite it being a Japanese game. It begins in the hilariously named Eagle Land, in obvious reference to America. It begins in the town of Onnet, some people pronounce it as Onnet, but I always pronounced it as Onet. A small sleepy little town with a bit of a gang problem. Thus begins the naming scheme for the first four towns. Onet, Tucson, a slightly larger town with the game's first shopping mall and home to both Apple and Orange Kid, along with the yet-to-be famous Venus. 3, a haunted town populated by ghosts and zombies. And finally, Foreside, the big city modeled on New York City itself. I am from a big city myself, and there is a corner downtown where there are 2 large buildings on each corner of the intersection. I always thought of it as the Foreside corner, and I always hear the Foreside music in my mind when I'm there. Later in the game, you will visit the town of Winters, where it is always winter, and its counterpart Summers, where it's always summer. You journey to the far east, into the deep darkness of a tropical jungle, and finally to the lost underworld, where dinosaurs still roam the earth, and of course Saturn Valley. Something altogether unique and quite unlike anything or anywhere else. No discussion of Earthbound would be complete without reference to the soundtrack, which is something truly special. This game really showcases how beautiful 16-bit music can really be. No matter how many times I play this game in my life, the music always brings a smile to my face. The music fits the environments perfectly. The music in Winters always reminds me of winter. The music from Summers makes me think of lazy summer days. Onet and Tucson's music invokes the imagery of sleepy small towns, and Foreside's music makes me think of the hustle and bustle of big city living. The music in Saturn Valley is something that is totally unique, just like the Mr. Saturns themselves who populate it. The font for their writing is creator's daughter's writing, who was a young child at the time. A friend of mine wants to get a tattoo in the Mr. Saturn font that just says inspirational quote, boing. There is a whole genre of music called rock candy after a consumable item in the game. It's music inspired by the soundtrack from Earthbound. Such is the popularity of the music from Earthbound that it gives rise to a whole music genre of its own. But my favorite music from the game has to be the melody of the Soundstone. You collect a small piece of it every time you defeat a boss guarding one of the sanctuary locations, and a more elaborate version of the song is played during the final credits, and it always makes me a little emotional. It's a beautiful song for a beautiful game, and a perfect way to end this beautiful journey. The enemies of Earthbound are both familiar and exotic. In the early stages of the game, the enemies are things we can recognize: gang members, corrupt cops, and wild animals. Some of these enemies are truly memorable. The cranky lady and the extra cranky lady come to mind, which if you have ever worked a job in your life which required you to interact with the public, I'm sure you've dealt with these characters in real life. The new age retro hippie is a classic. After a lifetime, I'm still trying to understand how someone could be both new age and retro. The unassuming local guy is also a favorite of mine. It's just a regular guy. It's just a normal dude. There's the abstract art in the Dali's clock, the little UFO and the cute little UFO, which is just a little UFO with a bow on its head. The mostly bad fly. He's not totally bad, he's just mostly bad. And of course the floppies, who could forget the floppies? Some of the enemies are really cute. The Noose Man and the Mad Duck are among my favorites in this category, along with the clumsy robot. I always let out a little "aw" when the clumsy robot falls down. I feel sorry for him, even though he can be a tough fight. I've always thought that the Mr. Molecule and Worthless Protoplasm were very cute as well, although I object to the name Worthless Protoplasm. He's not worthless, he's adorable. My favorite boss in the whole game is the guardian of the first sanctuary location, Giant Step, the much vaunted Titanic Ant. I've always had an interest in the story of the sinking of the Titanic, an interest that actually predates my first playthrough of Earthbound and is still with me today, a lifetime later. When I saw the name of this boss as a young child for the first time, I am sure my smile could have lit up the whole room. But I think everyone's favorite character, enemy or otherwise, is the Photo Man, who periodically drops in and takes a screenshot of you and the party. One thing I have noticed over a lifetime of playing this game is that the photos that he takes are unique to your playthrough. So if one of your party members is unconscious when the photo is taken, they will appear unconscious in the photo in the final credits of the game. There are some adult themes and subjects in this game, but they are very minor. The incident with the singer Venus and the stalker who gets dragged off the stage by security comes to mind. There is also the part of the game where in Threed, a woman will lure the party into the hotel room to be ambushed by a pack of zombies. I always wondered what the story behind that was, because the woman looks like a regular person and not a zombie herself. I always wondered about her. Is this a zombie in disguise? Did they pay her to act as bait? What did they pay her with? Zombie dollars? One of the things in the game that straddles the line between child and adult themes is the nature of the relationship between Ness and Paula. Throughout the game, there are references to the nature of this relationship being a romantic one. One example that comes to mind is right at the end of the game, where Jeff says to Ness and Paula that if you guys ever get married, he would like to be the one that repairs their small appliances. Also, at the end of the game, Paula will ask Ness to escort her home, and if the player refuses, Paula will escort Ness home and be present for the final scene. There are other small moments where characters will make small comments that subtly imply the nature of their relationship is a romantic one, or at least has the potential to one day become a romantic one. I think if you're older and are watching this video, then you can probably identify with that. This is how the first relationships in our lives often begin. We start off as friends who enjoy each other's company, and over time it slowly morphs into something more, and along the way people will make little comments about it, maybe opening our eyes to something that we just didn't see before. Just like Ness and Paula, these comments can be subtle things like, oh, you guys are so cute together, or maybe one day you'll get hitched, etc., etc. I remember my first relationship, and it began in a very similar way, but that's a topic I will discuss a little while later. There are a bunch of little jokes to be found in the world of Earthbound. The Beatles references and the Orange Kid machine, which plays Ode to the Orange Kid once and then breaks. The house in Onett, which I always buy once I have completed the game. It advertises itself as having a beautiful oceanfront view, and it's only once you buy it that you learn it has a beautiful oceanfront view because it's missing a wall. The guy in the hotel in Tucson is another favorite of mine. If you keep talking to him, he will eventually give you $50, which, pro tip, is enough to cover the stay in the hotel if you still have not yet added Paula to your party. My favorite part of this interaction are the two dialogue boxes where he says, "It's so hot today, it rocks," and the next one where he asks, "Is it cold today?" I still laugh at that a lifetime later. I have a lot of personal memories related to Earthbound, too many to list here, but I will share some of them with you. It was a dark and stormy night many years ago. Cliche, I know, but I swear it's true. A friend was spending the night at my house and we were playing Earthbound. It was right around the part of the game where you are returning to Peaceful Rest Valley, having gotten the pencil eraser from Apple Kid, and it was right as I was about to erase the pencil statue that I received a phone call from my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, telling us that two family friends had just been killed in a car accident. Every time I have ever played Earthbound since, when I get to that part with the pencil statue, I remember that dark and stormy night all those years ago, and I remember a phone call that I can never forget. I remember a day in my life from a lifetime ago now where the sky dawned a metallic yellow, and I knew that a torrential downpour was going to occur at any moment. As I was waiting for that to happen, the phone rang and it was a friend of mine, a friend that I had lent my copy of Earthbound to. He had been up all night playing the game and had just completed the section of the game where you fight the moles in the cave, and he needed to know what to do next. I told him to just head back to Foresight and he would be stopped along the way and given the diamond. That friend and I used to be so close. We used to be best friends even. But we would eventually have a falling out some years later, and despite my best efforts, I was never able to repair the damage and save our friendship. But every time I play Earthbound, and I get to the part of the story where the digger stops you on the bridge to give you the diamond, I always think of my former friend in that rainy day all those years ago, and I wonder what's happening in his life now. I have a few memories of my very first playthrough of Earthbound, but the one that sticks out the most is my first experience with the second to last sanctuary location, Lumine Hall. It is in this sanctuary location that Ness's thoughts are projected onto the wall for all of us to read. It was one of those thoughts that struck me profoundly. It was soon I'll be. I couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 the first time I played this game, but even then, on my very first ever playthrough, I realized what the game was trying to tell me. Soon I'll be finished. I only have one more sanctuary location to go. This game is coming to an end. Soon this wonderful game and this beautiful little adventure I was on would be coming to an end. I didn't want it to end, because I was enjoying the journey so much. This thought profoundly depressed me. I quickly saved the game at the next available opportunity and I went up to my building's rooftop. I remember this moment from my childhood. It was nighttime and I remember looking out over my neighborhood and just thinking about the passage of time. Even at that young age, I realized just how fast time was going by. I had thought of life and death at that point in my life, but I think this was the first time in my young life wherein I consciously realized just how fast time was going by. I remember thinking that I was in my last year of elementary school and that soon I'd be going to middle school, and before I knew it I would be in high school and then on to university. It's funny to think about that now, a lifetime later, a kid in the 6th grade, thinking about how quickly life was going by. But it's true. That night all those years ago, during my first playthrough of Earthbound, my first time in Lumine Hall, I realized just how quickly it was going by, and how soon it would be over. It's just like my grandmother always said to me, it all goes by so fast, and that is something that has only become more and more obvious to me as I've aged. I honestly think that that is the most brilliant thing that I have ever seen in any video game in my life. The authors of the story are signaling to the player that they are getting to the final sections of the game, and it allows them to emotionally prepare for the journey to come to an end. I have never felt this way about a video game ever again in my life. As I aged, I would play many more video games, and I would be aware that I was getting to the endgame section of those games. But I never felt as sad and depressed as I did all those years ago, when Earthbound told me that soon I would be finished. Those words hit a whole lot different now that I am a grown man in his 40s. I have plenty of memories of my favorite video game, Earthbound, but I think the memories that permeate the whole game for me are those of my first love. We met in homeroom in the 9th grade and quickly became friends. One of the first things I did was lend her my SNES and my copy of Earthbound. I remember the first day I lent it to her. Her mother called me to see if I knew where she was because she couldn't find her, and I said that I had parted ways with her right outside of her house. It turns out that she was in the back room of her house playing Earthbound. The reason her mom couldn't find her is because she didn't even think to look for her in front of the TV in the back room playing video games, because she had never done something like that before. Every night she would wait until her parents were asleep and then she would call me. She eventually moved the SNES into her room to more easily facilitate this. I would wait with great anticipation every night for that call. Not because I was happy to be talking to the girl I had a crush on, I mean I was, but also happy to share my favorite video game with someone. I remember how she would squeal with delight when she heard the music for the photo guy. It just so happened that she was getting into photography at the time, and so she loved seeing him drop down from the top of the screen. I myself waited with great anticipation for her to get to the end of the game and view the photo album. As it would happen, she also had a pet rabbit, and when she got to the final fight with Gygas, the controller stopped working because her rabbit had, unknown to her, chewed through the cable for the controller. So I went downtown to a video game store and I bought a replacement controller so that she could finish the game. Those days were a long time ago in my life, but the memories have not faded within me, and I sincerely hope that they never do. In this way, my memories and thoughts about my favorite video game will always be tied to the memories and thoughts about my first love. Even now, years later, decades later, a lifetime later, whenever I play Earthbound and the photo guy drops down, or I'm looking at the photo album at the end of the game, which is one of my favorite parts of the game, I always remember my first girlfriend. And I remember a version of myself that is so far away from who and what I am now that it may as well be someone else's life that I'm talking about. A bit of a sad note to this part of the story. One thing I have learned over the years is that the way SNES cartridges save games is by using a battery mounted to the circuit board inside of the actual cartridge itself. About a decade ago, my friend and I began doing yearly speedruns of the game. The best time we ever did it in was in a little over 7 hours, nowhere near the world record of 3 hours and 37 minutes as of the time of this writing, but still pretty good for us. That first speedrun that me and my buddy did took us almost 12 hours. Because we were not using a speedrun guide, we were just using the guide that comes with the game. Once my friend had left at the end of a long night of video gaming, I sat down alone and booted up the SNES again, and I loaded up the save file from my first girlfriend's playthrough. I had never deleted it. I never did. I never could. An interesting thing happened. For a brief moment, I was able to travel back in time. Back to a much younger version of myself. Back to a time when my childhood pet cat and my grandmother who raised me were both still alive. In that moment, memories and feelings came rushing back to me across the gulf of time. Memories of my youth, of my room in an apartment I will never see again. Memories of my first love. I looked at what she named everyone. She named Ness after me and Paula after her. Her favorite thing was books, which were one of my favorite things too. They still are, but these days I listen to audiobooks and haven't read an actual physical book in years. Her favorite food was tacos, which I had totally forgotten about over the years, and it was ironic because on the night of that first speedrun, I had made tacos for my friend and I. A big smile beamed across my face when that memory was unlocked. I played through the game and got to the end. I watched the credits and viewed the photo album. When it got to the part with the player's name, she had put her name, and at the end she added a little music note. That's something else that I had forgotten over the years. The feelings that came over me when I saw that again a lifetime later can never really be expressed in words. A year later, when my friend and I got together to do our next speedrun, I booted up the game again, and to my horror, all of the save files were gone. After a lifetime of service, the battery had finally given out, and with it went my connection to a past version of myself and a past version of the world itself that are long gone now. But I'm thankful that I got to see it one last time. I'm thankful that for a brief moment I got to travel back in time to a time and a place in my life that I can never and will never return to. One of the reasons I love the photo album at the end of the game so much is because it's a reminder that once the journey has been completed, all we have left are the memories. So I think it's important to make sure that you make the effort to make those memories good ones. Because once this journey called life is over, that's all anyone will have left of you. I think that one of the reasons why Earthbound remains such a popular game with such a huge cult following is because at its heart it tells a story that is at once both fantastical and commonplace. Earthbound is at its heart a coming of age story. It's about that weird period in our lives wherein we are no longer really a child anymore, but not quite yet an adult. We are old enough to go out into the world unescorted, but don't fully understand it yet. It's still in some ways a scary world, filled with potential enemies and dangers around every corner, but there are also new friends and experiences to be found there too. Slowly but surely, just like Ness and his friends, we gain experience, and we grow stronger. We level up just like they do, and as time goes by, we find ourselves more confident and more able to deal with the dangers and conflicts of life and the world. The gang members, the corrupt politicians and cops, the cranky ladies and the extra cranky ladies, over time we learn to deal with and overcome them. Slowly but surely, we become adults. In this way, I think of Earthbound as being a personal journey, because it mirrors the experiences we all have in our lives. Maybe I've never been anywhere in my life as exotic as Saturn Valley or the Lost Underworld, but I have been to some exotic locations, and I have seen and done some things in my time. Maybe I've never had to deal with worthless protoplasms or territorial oaks, but I have had to deal with gang members and cranky ladies, and I always think of Earthbound whenever I do. In some ways it makes life easier to deal with. So the next time when you unfortunately have to deal with a Karen at your workplace, just hear the battle music in your mind and know you have encountered the extra cranky lady. One of my favorite parts of the game are the 2 coffee breaks. The first is in Saturn Valley when you are about a quarter of a way through the game, and in Tenda Village when you're about a quarter of the way to the end. I always love those scenes. I love the music and the backgrounds and of course the dialogue that scrolls up the screen. It's kinda like a little reward for progressing in the game. These scenes allow you to take a moment and catch your breath. They also allow you to reflect on how far you have come. I've actually done this in real life. There have been points in my life wherein I've made myself a cup of coffee and sat back and listened to the song and just thought about life. In fact, back in the day when Napster was a thing, which just goes to show you how old I am that I remember the days of Napster, this song was on the first CD I ever burned. I have listened to the song while having a cup of coffee at various points in my life, and I always find it soothing. I remind myself of how far I have come and the challenges that I have overcome. I remind myself that although I've been through so much in my journey already, that there is still more to come and that I need to be thankful for that. Because when there are no more enemies to fight and no more challenges to overcome, it will be because the journey is over. And just like my experience in Lumine Hall in Earthbound, I don't want it to be over, because I'm enjoying it too much. If you are struggling with something in your life, maybe take a little coffee break for yourself. If a natural hot spring is not available, then maybe you can make do with a hot bath or hot shower. If you're not a fan of coffee, then maybe a cup of tea will do. Take a moment for yourself, have a drink and listen to this song. Think about the journey that you are on and all the friends and enemies that you have encountered along the way. Think about all the challenges that you have overcome and how many challenges in your journey are still to come. So whoever you are, wherever you are, and whatever it is that you are dealing with, I wish you luck. One of the themes that runs through this discussion is the passage of time. This is something that one feels more acutely as the years go by. Oftentimes I will find myself in a discussion with friends and coworkers, and one of us will mention something and the other person will say something like, "You realize that what you're talking about took place 5, 7, or 9 years ago, right? COVID was COVID-19, as in the year 2019. That was 6 years ago, as of the time of this writing. The better part of a decade. But does it feel that way? Does it feel that long ago?" The memories I have from my own personal journey feel the same. My grandmother who raised me died in 2001 when I was 17. Every year I go to visit her in the cemetery, sometimes alone and sometimes with family. In 2021, the 20th anniversary of my grandmother's death, I was there with my mom and my aunt. I said to my aunt, "It's been 20 years. To which she replied to me, "Yeah, I know, it all goes by so fast, doesn't it?" And then she said something to me that I will never forget. She said, "You know, Scott, in another 20 years, you might be standing here all by yourself." And I remember thinking, she's right. It all goes by so fast. On my most recent playthrough of Earthbound, I got to the part right at the start of the game where you fight the Starman Jr. Upon defeating him, Buzz says that he came from 10 years in the future to stop him. 10 years in the future would have been the year 2004 or 2005, which at the time of this writing is 20 years in the past. I remember a time in my life where the year 2005 seemed like the distant future, not far in the past. Such is the nature of the passage of time. The days are long, but the decades are short. I will always remember the day that I graduated from university, because the day before that was the day that Michael Jackson died. I was on my way to a friend's house, and while I was waiting for the bus, my friend texted me to tell me that Michael Jackson had just died. So when I got to his place, we watched the news for a bit and just absorbed the shock of it. And then we broke out his copy of Guitar Hero and had an impromptu tribute concert. A little while later, I was talking to that friend, and he told me that after I had left his place that night, he received an unexpected phone call from his aunt. She was crying her eyes out and asking him, "Did you hear Michael Jackson died?" My friend was a little taken aback by this, and he said to her, "I never knew that you were such a huge Michael Jackson fan." To which she responded that she wasn't. It was just that with the event of his death and all the media endlessly replaying his music, it took her back in time to another version of herself who lived another life in another time and place. My friend and his family are from a Central American nation, one that was governed by a military dictatorship when he was born. This dictatorship outlawed everything having anything to do with America, including cultural exports like Michael Jackson music, for example. When my friend's dad and aunt were young, they would gather with their friends, close the curtains, and break out their bootleg copies of Michael Jackson records. They would party with their friends and listen to forbidden music and imagine when they would move to Canada and make a better life for themselves. And now, a lifetime later, with the death of Michael Jackson and the media endlessly replaying his music, it took her back. It took her back to a time and a place that she could never and would never return to. I feel the same way about my favorite game, Earthbound. The sights and the sounds take me back to various times and places in my life that I cannot return to. The lessons of Earthbound have stuck with me throughout my entire life. That everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, that sooner or later we all need to rely on someone else to protect us or heal us or revive us in one way or another, that you don't know what you have until it's gone. That last one is particularly notable. It's only at the parts of the game where you lose Paul and Pooh that you suddenly realize how much stronger they make your party and how much you relied on them, how not having them in the party anymore puts you into a much weaker, more dangerous position. If you have ever played Earthbound, then to repeat the quote from Clan of the Grey Wolf at the start of this discussion, to have experienced Earthbound is to have loved Earthbound. If you have never played this game, well, I don't know why you would be watching this video if you have never played this game before. You were warned at the beginning not to do that. But if you have never played this game before, then I envy you, because you can still experience this beautiful little gem for the first time. And if you have ever played this game, then I am sure you loved it just as I have my whole life. If you have played this game, well, maybe it's been a while. Maybe it's been a few years, or maybe it's been a few decades. Maybe your life today is in a totally different place than it was when you last played it. Maybe you are a totally different person than you were when you first played this game. But I would encourage you, find the time and go through it again. And remember a world that no longer exists, and a version of yourself that no longer exists. A world before social media, before Facebook and YouTube, a world before the internet even. Remember the people who were once in your life and that you were once so close to, but for whatever reason are no longer there. Remember what it felt like to be young and in love for the first time. Remember what it felt like to journey out into the world on your own for the first time. And just like my friend's aunt when she's listening to Michael Jackson music, or myself when I am playing my favorite video game, Earthbound for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Remember a time and a place in your life that you will never and can never return to. I think it's important to remember these things because life is too short, it all goes by so fast, and none of us have as much time as we think we do. And soon I'll be, and soon, sooner than any of us realize, it will be